Yes, I'm actually no longer considered to be a kinesiologist. The nature of the work has changed over the years. Although we use kinesiology, the work has really expanded beyond the kinesiology framework that I was originally taught about 25 years ago, maybe now. So I've been practicing for the last 20 years. I just realized the other day I've been here in Totnes since 1994, and I started practicing here at Detta Lang's place in 1994. When I was a young lad, I wanted to be a biochemist, and I studied and studied biochemistry like there was no tomorrow. I loved it. And then I realized when I was around about 16 or 17 that actually biochemistry wasn't going to give me the answers I was really looking for. And I was getting more and more confused and more disorientated into terms of what is the truth of life? What is the truth of my life? So then I realized at that point, actually, that there was just no point pursuing an academic career, and I was just going to go and live in India. At the tender age of 18, I decided to forego a university education and pretty much jumped onto an aeroplane with a bunch of hippies. I remember it was the Bimar Bangladesh airline. It was the only airline I've been on that's a flock wallpaper on the inside. It was like being inside of an Indian restaurant. It took about 2 days to get to Calcutta. And when I got there, I had absolutely no money and no ticket home and no visa. I just had this bunch of kind of aspiring kind of hippies come monks that I was hanging out with for possibly the rest of my life. So it was a bit of a daunting prospect, really. So I ended up living in Bengal for a couple of months, and then in Nepal, and then in Vrindavan. And then I was backwards and forwards after being rescued by my mother, very, very kindly through the British consulate. I was backwards and forwards for some years, living the lifestyle really of a monk. And you probably wouldn't have recognized me back then. I had a shaven head and saffron robes and probably a bit thinner than I am now, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, that was my big passion. And one of the things we came to learn about in India and through the Vedas was obviously to do with health. And the ultimate source of all well-being and all health. And we understood implicitly from the scriptures and from our lifestyle that that is to do with a sense of connection, our sense of union, what in India they call yoga, which isn't just the asanas, it's actually a bigger system. Yoga literally means to connect. So the lifestyle we were taught and what we were educated there was to do with the art of this connection through devotion, through love. And this was my life for about 8 years. But unfortunately, I got too ill. And I couldn't really sustain that because my health wasn't all that good. And I noticed, even though this was really one of the cornerstones of the philosophy that we were living, was that if we are connected, then we will be healthy and well. I noticed that a lot of my fellow monks and a lot of people that were sharing this ashram life with me were actually quite ill people, and myself included. So I knew there was something missing. I didn't have the answer. And I became disillusioned with that lifestyle and eventually came back to live in England. I was clinically depressed at that point, I think, for about 2 years, which wasn't the cheeriest or the brightest time in my life. And then I studied nutrition. And I went on this nutrition course in order that I could really just get off the bed and get off my backside and do something useful with my life. And it was there that I met my ex-partner. And very quickly she got pregnant and we had a child together who's actually mentally and physically handicapped. But it was at the beginning of this phase that I discovered kinesiology. I remember one day I was feeling quite down and quite frustrated with my life, and she said to me, "Oh, you need to go and see a therapist." And I said, "No, I don't think so. I'm not going to go and do that kind of thing. I don't want to go and see a therapist." She says, no, you really need to go and see a therapist. You need some serious help." So eventually she convinced me, and I went to see a guy in London called Matthew Schrock. Matthew, we had a couch much like this one. He laid me down, and he put my fingers into different positions, and he pulled on my arm. And then he told me things about my inner reality and my inner life that was just mind-blowing in about the first 10 minutes. And I realized at that very moment that this is what I need to do. And no matter what happens, I'm going to do this. It took me another 3 years before I trained with Solahind, and then I trained with him for about 4 years, and then I set up in practice here in Totnes in '94. One of the key aspects of this work really is reclaiming our authority. reclaiming our sense of connection, and really tasting this on the inside. There's a lot in the New Age, and there's a lot of information as we live in this information age right now, circulating on the internet, in books, and I'm a very avid reader, and I love all this stuff. But the difficulty I had, particularly also when I was in India, but when I also came back from India, is that I was studying, I was learning, I was digesting all this information, but I wasn't actually living it. I wasn't feeling it on the inside. And that's why I was really suffering with lots of really poor health, depression, and all kinds of emotional moods and states and things like this were going on for me at that time. And I realized actually all this information and all this understanding can only take me so far. And it can only take everybody so far. And the key really is, how am I going to actually experience this reality that I'm reading about, that I'm studying about, that I understand so well with my mind? How am I going to experience it and taste it for real through my inner sense and through my inner feelings? And it's really that journey that this work has taught me. The work primarily is really about what we call opening the vessel. We are all vessels. And as vessels, we contain something. And there's something that we understand in this work that we contain in what we call the life forces. So the life forces really are within this vessel. And it's the nature of these forces that actually takes us in or out of connection. And the reason for that is very, very simple. We're all human beings. And as human beings, we're always surrendering. When I was in the ashram and when I studied in the temple, the emphasis and the focus was on being surrendered. We had to be surrendered. More and more surrender was required of us daily, minute by minute. But what I came to realize later is that actually we have to be incredibly discerning as to what we surrender to. For the most part, as human beings, we surrender to the most inappropriate or the incorrect forces within us. Usually we surrender to that which is below us in terms of our human nature. So what I'm going to do in a little while is I'm going to take you on a journey, and I'm going to explain what I understand to be the human house, or this life forces, so we understand the nature of our inner reality. And then, if I've got time, I hope I have, I'm going to demonstrate this. Yeah, I've got time? Okay. Where we started with this work is with nature. And I'm sure we're all familiar with the natural kingdoms, the natural order as it is in the outer world. So we have the mineral kingdom, we have the vegetative kingdom, the animal kingdom, and then we have the human kingdom. And then above that, we consider what we call the noble self, or the noble kingdom. So I'm going to draw on I'm going to draw my house, what's called the human house, on this board here, and I'm going to fill in all these different levels and all these different kingdoms, but not on the outside, because we're familiar with this as it exists out there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to depict this to you guys as it exists on the inside. And this is an inner territory that actually we're also kind of intuitively familiar with, but it is yet to be really crystallized or defined. Okay, this is my house. And really this is a metaphor for this body, for our container. What we have down here is what we call, or what I call, the basement. This is the basement of our house. This is actually our physical body. This is our physical reality. One thing you may notice about the body and our physical reality is that it's subterranean. It's below the level of the earth. It's below the ground. So in psychology, they would call this the subconscious mind. So it's the subconscious. Now, what do we do with our subconscious? What's in our subconscious? Most of the subconscious is a dark place, a bit like a basement. It's a little bit creepy, it's a little bit scary. We don't tend to want to go down there. It's a fearful place to be. But what's actually down in the basement? What do we do in basements? Storage. Yeah, storage. Everything down in the basement basically is our past. It's our histories. It's our history. So everything in this life that we don't want to illuminate, that we don't want to be conscious of, basically it gets stashed away into our subconscious, gets put away down to our basement. But not only this life, because we have the inter-utero life. We have previous existences that we bring over also. Past life experiences are also stored down here in the basement. And most importantly, one of the key things in this work that's down in the basement is our ancestral past lives. So down here, we have all our ancestors. So all this stuff is stashed away. It basically just sits there collecting dust until something, a vibration, comes in from the world around us and activates it. DNA also we have down here. It's our DNA code. So we have all these patterns from our past, from our histories, all sitting there dormant until such time as they become active. When something is triggered or something is activated within the basement, it sends out what we call a signal. These are signals. Everything down there resonates. Everything down there vibrates. In fact, when we're down in the basement, we are considered to be depressed. This is where I was living before I got into this work. I was a basement dweller. Actually, the other interesting thing about the basement, and this is one thing I actually just couldn't accept when I first heard it, because I felt like, oh, this can't be true, is that down in the basement we have our mind. It's our mind. Because the mind is considered to be the seed principle, or the seed active ingredient in creation. Everything starts with the mind. So down here, we have a collection of all sorts of things. Some a bit creepy, some a bit scary, most of which we're quite fearful of. And this was the difficult thing we had in the temple, in the ashram, going back all those years, is that we would just want to go to heaven. And we separated from the basement. We would never go here because it was considered to be a dirty place. So we would go along in our lives trying to illuminate, trying to surrender, trying to be better people, but never resolving anything at this level. And this can often be the case, I find, with a lot of clients. And a lot of people that come and see me, is that this place remains what we call unilluminated. Down here, it's still dark. Even though it's dark, it's giving off vibrations. It's giving off energy. These are what we call signals. And this is felt at the next level. So if you think about how things are structured in the natural world, we look at the natural kingdoms, we see there is earth, soil, and out of the soil we have vegetation. So we have the vegetative level. So as this gives off the signal, this receives the signal. Everything here is receptive. I'm going to go through this very quickly. I normally do this as a talk I normally give in about 2 hours. So I'm going to go through this in about 15 minutes. Yeah. So this is our receptive capacity. So this receives the signal. It's like our antennae. Basically, this area is what we call our feelings. These are our feelings. So down here we have the signals being generated. Up here we have the capacity to receive the signals, and the receptivity of that signal is what we feel. Yeah. Moving up from there, we have what's called the animal. So this receives, and the animal amplifies. Actually, they have this expression in shamanism, power animal. Power animal. So what we're receiving here, which is feminine, basically becomes amplified here, which is masculine. Everything at this level is input. Everything at the animal level is output. Women tend to be more here. Men tend to be more here. We live in an animal society. It's one of those, what you might call human animal, we would call it, where we're very, very concerned about results. We're very concerned about productivity. We aspire to be great, to be big, to be large, to be powerful, to be heard, to be seen, to be noticed. This is our animal. It's the part of us which has dynamism, which has expression, which has energy, which has drive. This is also something that actually in this modern day and age flags a lot. ME, fatigue syndromes, things like this. A weak animal force. It's associated with us, what do you call the central nervous system and the skeletal muscular system. Above that, we have the human. The human decodes. And the human illuminates. The human makes sense of all of this. And ultimately, the human surrenders. Which brings me back to where I was about 10 minutes ago. Because the idea that I really wanted to get to when I was talking about surrender was that we tend to, as human beings, to surrender to what is beneath us. We're either surrendering to a pattern, or an emotion, or a feeling, or an idea, or a belief, or we're surrendering laterally to the forces that bear down upon us from the world, but we very rarely surrender to what's above. And the essence of the work that I do really is to do with that one thing. And that's all we do. Now we understand implicitly that there are two things here. Everybody knows everything about themselves and their house. We have all of us within us, and this is a presupposition we make within the work, we have within us all the innate wisdom and knowledge that we ever need. Way above and beyond anything that is held or contained at the level of the human animal mind. The second thing is that the body and our system is always trying to heal itself all the time. Healing force and healing powers are constantly at work. The difficulty is that we tend to block and we tend to obscure the light from heaven. So it doesn't allow, really, for this healing energy to flow in. And the reason why that happens is that we've surrendered inappropriately. We've surrendered to the wrong force. When we surrender here, the healing energy can flow. When we surrender to anything else, we obscure the capacity for that healing energy. But it is always there, and it is always flowing. So these are the two big presuppositions we have within this work. Behind any condition, any problem, or any issue, you already know the answer. Not mentally, not with your human thinking, but you have the wisdom inside of you. The answer is already there. And the second thing is, healing is automatic. So all we do in this work, really, is we allow for the client to tell their story. To basically say, this is my story behind my cancer, behind my arthritis, behind my leukemia, behind my bronchitis, whatever it may be, there is a story. In this work we call that ontology. Ontology literally means the processes or the steps that bring us to our current state of being, to where we are now. This is ontology. So what we do with what we do in this work is we unwind that, we roll that backwards. And then we just nudge. We don't do any healing. We don't do any fixing. We don't do any repair work. We basically nudge the client so they can access this for themselves cleanly and clearly. And they do their own healing. They do their own repair, their own fixing. So it's a very gentle process, but it's very, very empowering because there are two prongs to this. The first thing is you will understand precisely and really clearly, no ambiguity. This is not about me guessing what's going on with you or with anybody else. This is about you informing yourself what's going on. There's one part of you, a much deeper part of you, the noble self, explains this precisely. And then that part also will make recommendations in terms of this is what needs to happen. This is what needs to take place in order that a shift or a change can be permanent. And then healing is automatic. In fact, healing is almost inconsequential in the process, because the real meaning behind this whole process is personal development. It's personal growth, it's personal expansion. And that's what all disease, and that's what all illness, and all issues and all problems are really prompting us to. They are. So all conditions and all issues and all problems are actually an expression of healing. It's the body trying to heal itself. Nature doesn't make any mistakes. It's all really the body's attempt to heal itself. And for you, in that process, to evolve, to grow in your awareness, to grow in your capacity, your illumination. So one of the key features of this work is that we say any problem, any issue, any symptom, is simply just a display. And we use computer terminology to describe this. So if you imagine that your inner wisdom or your inner knowing is the hard drive in a computer system, then the monitor really is your physical display. And the body always, always displays information. It's like a computer has to display information, but it can only display what's there on the hard drive. Yeah, can you see? So we're always, always, always displaying information. My teacher Salahin, he said basically the human does only two things. We only ever do two things. The first thing is we illuminate. We face what it is that we need to see, and the second is we surrender it. The rest of it happens automatically through the power of grace. That's automatic, that goes without saying. This quick sketch I've drawn here of what's called the secondary life forces. Over and above this is what we call the primary life forces. So when we talk about grace, we're really talking about the primary life forces that are over and above our noble self. We define that in two ways. We define that as the forces that envelop and the forces that penetrate. So these are the two divine forces, the feminine and masculine aspects of, you might call, the Godhead. The enveloping forces, which are the angelic world, which nurture, support, hold your hand, they listen, they heal. And the penetrative forces, which is the masculine God force, which scours and cleans and gives vision. So we call this the primary life forces, along with the noble self. The noble self really has all the answers. The noble self is an incredible reservoir of understanding. And at this level, we have a template or we have a pattern that we are seeking to express in any given life. There's like a purpose, there's a mission that we're all on. There's a reason why we're all here. That template or that mission or that pattern is down here in its opposite, in its counterform as DNA. It's our inheritance. So we choose our parents, we choose our culture, we choose our society, we choose the time of our birth according to the pattern that we have here, which includes the DNA that is coming through our ancestry. That's why a lot of the work that I do, the final resolution of the issue often is when we actually look at ancestral issues and we clean them. Because we're actually at that point accessing what in this work we call our resources. You see, down here in the basement, even though it's a very scary and dark and foreboding place, we have down here what we call our gems. Just like in the earth, you've got gemstones. It's just, yeah. Our gems really is our innate sense of value. This is what a gem is. It gives us our sense of value. It's what sparkles, it's what shines, it's what has luster, it's what's bright. But it's hidden down here in our basement, amongst all the dirt and all the crap from the past, you might say. So why is it that our gem is here in the filthiest and the darkest of places? Yeah, it's interesting. It's because when we come down here and we get in touch with something that is, you might say, the opposite of what's up here, it actually awakens our awareness to what's here. We have to have a point of contrast in our consciousness, a reference point that's different from who we are in order to define who we are. You see, it's like we have to define the non-self or the not-self in order that we can actually go, aha, this is me. Or this is a quality of courage, or this is a quality of patience, or this is a quality of love that I didn't know I had until I was in a situation where those very resources were challenged. And I had to find that, and I had to dig down deep inside of me, face that, illuminate it, and bring it out and express it. And in that moment, consciousness is illumined to that resource, which is part of the plan up here, but you've discovered down there. This is the journey as human beings that we're all on. And we're really seeking to illuminate really our ancestral history. Now we'll do that during the course of our life, naturally and organically. But what most of us try and do is we try and use the trickster mind or the power of belief and thinking to actually, almost as it were, cheat ourselves into actually becoming self-realized without actually having to go down here and deal with this stuff, right? So we often get trapped. We call this part of our consciousness here the trickster. It's the part, what we call the part that thinks it knows, but actually doesn't. Now, as human beings, we've become incredibly sophisticated and incredibly clever. I mean, we are. We are incredibly creative organisms. It's in our nature. But that in itself can be a trap, because too much of this understanding, too much learning, too much trying to figure it out, too much reason and rationale, actually in itself obscures the light from heaven. And quite a lot of my clients, more men I have to say than women, are actually stuck in this dynamic, where they actually think they know and they think they can work it out. And it's the constant pursuance of knowledge and understanding that just never ends. And where are they the whole time? They're down in the basement with their minds, so they're feeling depressed. But you can't help but be on this journey. We are on this odyssey. This odyssey is set from the noble self. Your course is set at the very moment you draw your first breath. So you're on this journey, you're on this odyssey. So the patterns that you inherit are very much a part of your physical makeup. They are a part of your basement. And you will be activated, and you will experience this. There is no way you're going to hide from that pain, from that anguish, from that distress, from what's down here. You will be activated at times, and you will feel this. Those are the times, according to this model and this map, when we need to go, great. This is a chance for me to find my resources, or at least one, and cultivate that and develop that and grow as a human being. Now, I have to say this, I want to make a distinction here from my time as a monk. We as spiritual beings do not grow. We are eternally Satchitananda, as they say in Sanskrit, eternally, blissfully, eternally the same. What grows is our awareness of ourself. And that's the distinction. And it's the one quality that human beings can do that the lower kingdoms cannot. A human being can self-illuminate. In this work, we call that reflection. We can become aware of ourselves. We can illuminate everything that's beneath us. We call this switching on the light. Yeah, it's very simple. So behind every condition, we basically say, okay, there's a condition, that's a display. That is just light, if you like, information. It's informing us. It's actually instructing us. And then what happens to most of us is we go, I'm going to separate from that physical hurt, that physical pain, from that display. I'm going to go up towards heaven, into my head, and I'm going to try and work it all out at this level. The display was not created at that level. The display is a function of our higher nature. And really, it's just seeking greater healing, greater joy, greater bliss, greater love. So any condition is just that. It's light expressing to know itself. We understand mind actually is in the basement. The reason is it is the seed. It is the seed factor in creation. You could say everything starts with thought. Yeah, from thought comes feeling, from feeling comes action. Yeah, and then from that you can illuminate and notice, as it were, become self-aware. So mind in itself is like a seed. If you think of a seed, you put it in the ground, it goes into the soil, and it germinates. And I think they've discovered this a long, long time ago with the it's called ECG machines, where they wire you up with loads of electrodes. You can actually see on the oscilloscopes the different frequencies that your brain is producing. It produces a whole gamut of frequencies all the time. Lots of signals, lots of energy constantly being generated by our thoughts. And different thoughts also produce different signals. This is also provable. In fact, they have computers now that actually you can get wired up to that you can control with your thoughts. It's pretty cool, depending on your perspective. Yeah, and that's because every thought is a signal that's going out into the universe. And down here, basically, everything just resonates, everything just vibrates. This is a vibrational universe at this level. So this is where it all starts with vibration, thought. What we have here is the animal mind, the animal consciousness. Now, the animal consciousness is primarily survived or geared towards survival. It's what I call narrowband, as opposed to broadband, you could say. The animal consciousness is narrowband. Everything is defined by basically how can I eat, how can I feel safe, how can I have shelter, and how can I mate? And that's basically the animal consciousness and the animal mind, survival orientated. What we have here at the human level, when the human gets involved with the animal mind, is we have what's called the human instinctual consciousness, which means someone can be very, very sophisticated and very, very clever and learned in terms of their security and survival. Can you see? But that's just animal again. It's just that we've become very clever and very sophisticated in terms of how we do that. And boy, oh boy, have we become so complicated with it. The simplest of things in this day and age, just like a roof over your head, this has become such a complicated thing. And this is the human animal consciousness. Emotions, by the way, exist at this level. This, I mentioned earlier, is feelings, our receptivity, our feminine capacity to feel. But when a feeling becomes amplified by the animal, it becomes emotive. It becomes literally emoted, expressed. We've understood this in this kinesiological world for the last 30-odd years, that this is happening all the time. The signals are constantly being received through our sensory mechanisms, through our central nervous system, and that activates or deactivates DNA every second of every day. I mean, me standing here activates DNA. You listening to me activates certain DNA. It's constant, it's fluid, it's a dance, it's constantly happening. So what's happening here is just like a soup, it's a mix of vibration. That's all it is, it's just energy and vibration. And depending upon what's triggered and what's activated here will determine what we feel like here. That's why we get out of bed the wrong side sometimes, or we have days that are sometimes just gloomy, and other days when we just feel actually okay and quite good. Different patterns, different codes are giving off different signals that then cause us to feel differently. And that's all it is. So, so that is the purpose basically and the understanding that I have behind every single display, be it cancer, be it anything. That there is a story, there is a reason, and that this is a healing process. If we're going to be able to access, you could say, an individual's inner knowing, what you might call our inner wisdom, how can we do this? Because if I just, say you have some issue, say you have some problem, I just say to you, what's the answer? You'll just say, well, I don't know. I haven't got a clue. And why? Because you see, our mind is not illuminated, our mind is in the dark. So for the most part, we actually, at the mental level, actually don't know. And that would be true. So if I use language, if I'm talking to you in English or any other language and I'm trying to elicit a response from you in terms of actually, maybe it's about this, or maybe it's about that, or should we have a look at this? Then we could go on a little journey together exploring all those little possibilities. But this still might not be your truth. Can you see? Still might not be hitting that nail on the head. Why? Because language in itself is a construct of the mind. So we're going in this perpetual loop in the same place in the basement, down in the darkness again. So we can't use language. So what do we do? We're going to use feedback. And we're going to use the technique of kinesiology to feedback around this system. And we're going to use a kind of language. You might say a style of language. My teacher Solahin calls this a proto-language. It's an ancient language that I recognized in my first treatment, going back to those early days with Matthew Schrock, when he put my fingers into some positions, and then he told me incredible things about what was going on inside of me. These finger positions have been a part of every ancient culture on the planet going back at least 5 to 6 or more thousand years. In India, we call them mudras. Who's not heard of this term? You haven't? We've all seen it. I can guarantee you it because we've all seen the Buddha and how he sits there in his what's called padasana, or the lotus posture, with his fingers in this position. Yeah, and there are many, many different types of mudras. Christ also, I think, is sometimes depicted with a teaching mudra in his hands. Yes. So mudras are actually part of our collective psyche. In this work, we call that a library. So each and every one of us is actually plugged into this library. So we all have our innate understanding of what mudras are and what they mean. Not at the conscious level, because this is actually sub-basement. It's below the subconscious. But the beautiful thing about this system is that the body will feed back and respond to mudras. There's one or two ways we can do this work. Either I can lead the client or the client can lead me. And we don't do leading the client. So I have to switch off, as it were, my brain in terms of an organ that's going to actually know the truth, that actually knows what's going on, that they need to follow. This part of me becomes receptive to actually what it is that they're saying. But where do we start to do this is, well, in the context of this work, we have a primary set of mudras, what we call master modes. These operate like doorways from the external realities of symptoms and distress, you might say, what's going on in the physical body in your life, to the inner content. They're like gateway mudras. There's about 12 of them. Once we have a gateway mudra, we've effectively shifted from the outer reality to the story at the inner level, and then the client can take over. Because at that level, we have access to all of the library, the entire library. There's about 1,500 mudras or so. And they can then tell us where to go and what to do. And they know precisely everything. I mean, it's unbelievable what people know, what we all know and what we're all carrying around inside of us. It is amazing. I mean, the mind is like a candle compared to the sun, compared to the wisdom that's actually in the root of all of us. It really is. It's amazing. So we trust that implicitly. Now, what happens in the context of this work, once we actually go through a gateway from the outer to the inner, then each mudra has 31 submodalities. 31 submudras. The reason for that is that there are 31 possible combinations of 5 fingers. It's just a way of navigating through the territory. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 2, 3, 2, 4, 2, 5, 3, 4, 3, all the way up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 31 if you do it all. Yeah. So these are called submodalities, and each one of them is a mudra that also has 31 submodalities. And each one of those is a mudra that has 31 submodalities. So what the client usually always does is they weave, as it were, through the work, through the mudras, going here, going there, feeding back information via the kinesiology, not even speaking. They're telling me exactly what's going on, why it's happened, what are the stages and the processes that brought them to this condition or this place, this state of being, and they haven't said a single word. It's uncanny. And I hope I'm going to be able to demonstrate this. Now, I say I hope because this work usually requires about 20 minutes or so in terms of preparing the client and also preparing myself, no doubt, to do the work. And we're going to miss all of that because we don't, that would obviously extend this talk a little bit too long. So we're going to jump in really, and we're just going to hope for the best. And we're just going to see basically what someone may want to say about a particular issue or a particular problem. Who here hasn't heard of kinesiology? Who doesn't know what that is? Okay. It's a muscle testing. Basically, kinesiology is a binary feedback language where a muscle can be either strong or it can be weak. Basically, all we're looking for here is what's called a binary response. So it's a weak muscle that goes strong or a strong muscle that goes weak. That's it. That is kinesiology. And basically, that indicates whether something is relevant or something's not relevant. Okay, so this is very, very ad hoc. This is, you might call, very unprofessional in terms of doing this sort of, working in this sort of way. But I'm nonetheless going to give it a go, just so that you can actually see practically and physically how this system works. Let's get my laptop up and running. Okay, so borrow this arm. It's not stressed or strained or injured in any way. Okay, this hand's down the side. I'm going to put your arm into the test position, and I want you to reset back to this position at the beginning of every test. So I want you to remember this. A few things to note. One is that your arm's at right angles, and that's as measured from me. So watch out it doesn't roll past the right angle. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that the palms are facing towards the feet, okay? And that the arm is also straight, but it's not forcibly locked, okay? I'm going to apply gentle and firm pressure to the wrist, which will move your arm this way, and I will do so on the command of hold. And this is probably the most important point in all of this. Do not hold your breath, okay? So breathing throughout. And you're pushing, obviously, counter to my pressure towards the wall. Okay, so breathing, wait for it, arms forward, yeah. You can see why I say all the things I do. All right, so hold, and just gently, and we're just meeting. Okay, it's good, nice. Now I'm breathing again, and hold. Okay, let that go. Okay, good. And now you weren't able to tell whether that was weak or not because it felt to you like I was pushing harder. I know. Hold. Okay, good. And breathe in, hold. Okay. What you're doing there is what's called compensating. So the body has a sense that actually this is weak and it should be strong, but it's actually weak, and I'm going to compensate for it by actually applying more force. So what I want you to do now is not to compensate, not to apply more force. All right, try again. And hold. Oops. Hold. Pushing back. Need some resistance there. What I'm doing here is I'm gauging his animal strength, his animal force. Hold. Okay, so same pressure now, no compensation. Hold. Weak. Now the reason why I did that is because he failed the polarity test. Because if you noticed, I test him with this hand and I test with that hand. He basically says, lights off, down here in the basement. And that's all he said. In terms of his issue, whatever it is that he wants to look at, it's not illuminated. So he hasn't actually brought what he needs to see here. He hasn't faced it fully and illuminated, brought it into consciousness. Illumination in this is consciousness.
So
yeah.
Because he tried to compensate?
No, because he's actually switched. So if I do this, hold. Yeah. And hold. See, I swapped hands. Yeah. So each hand is a different charge. One's a positive, one's a negative. I don't know which way around I am. But usually this hand always tests positive, and then I swap and there's a negative test. What you have down here in the basement basically is what's called switches. Things are either on or off, positive or negative. There's no shades of grey. Either a gene is activated or it's not activated. Can you see? Either a pattern is expressed or it's not expressed. The signal can be strong or it can be weak, but the pattern itself is either on or off. So what I was testing here is just to see, actually, are you able to switch on? Light. Can you see there's another switch here, which is the light switch? If you were to go into a basement, you wouldn't stumble around in the dark. If you wanted to locate a resource, you wanted to find something, you'd first of all switch on a light. So he's basically saying, actually, as far as my consciousness is concerned, I'm in the dark. What this pattern is trying to inform me, instruct me, I don't understand. If the light was switched on, and he was aware and he was facing, he was fully cognizant to what this pattern, and we don't know what that is yet, but we will discover what that is, he would be strong. Can you see? So you wouldn't switch off, but he was strong, weak. And the strong, weak indicates that the light is out. It's just the language of feedback. It's because we can only deal with yes and no, positive and negative. And we have to have some system or some framework to understand what he's saying. So this and this basically means lights out. That's our model, you might say. It's almost as if we have to, first of all, switch on the torch. So we don't stumble on the step as we're going into the basement, you know. And then we can actually have a look around and go, oh, okay, that's the old, lawnmower, or that's the old bike, or that's the old resource that I'm looking for. It's on the shelf. I need to get that down, dust it, unpack it, look at it. And that takes an hour, maybe 2 hours to do all of that. So the whole process itself, which is usually up to 2 hours, is the process of illuminating that resource. But they'll never do and they'll never chew more than they're capable of dealing with, because the process is directed by the part of them that knows, intimately what their limits, what their capacities are. Although we can force it, because the animal can violate. The animal can actually enter into a territory that is not appropriate for it. We do it all the time, even as therapists. We sniff around and we look and we go, okay, this is, what the hell's this? Look what I found, But it may not be an appropriate thing, and it may not be an appropriate area for us to enter into. But without that guidance, we're only using our instinctual human mind then to navigate into that territory, so we could go in there erroneously and cause damage or harm. But when we actually are rooted from guidance, in terms of actually accessing the true human and the noble self, then we're always safe. That part of us knows us, it is us. I mean, it knows us, it is us. This is who or what we are. So therefore, it makes no mistakes. It has a wisdom that's beyond comprehension. So it'll always navigate in a way, and it'll only ever give you as much as you can deal with at any given time. It does that in your everyday life. As long as we do not engage or overly engage, let's say, the animal force that just then pushes the boundary. This is where violation comes in, or can come in. And then we can end up in deep waters. Okay, let's get my database up and running. Okay, let's have a look. So how are you doing?
Wonderful.
Yeah? Feels better already. You haven't even started. Okay, pushing back, hold. Okay, so hold. All right, so I'm just going to hold a couple of buttons here. These are called switches. It's kidney 27. Hold. No, relax. Hold. There, that's made him really solid now. So what normally switched him off now actually is stronger than when he's actually testing with the strong arm. Are they a little tender?
Yeah, a little.
Yeah, usually are. So what we're doing here is we're actually forcing a switch on. See, we've got to have a starting point. In other words, we've got to get the torch out of our bag, or we've got to have a little bit of illumination just to get the ball rolling. So I want you to hold each of these points, each with a finger, each with a finger. Now, what we used to have to do back in the old days when I learnt this, there.
Do I press?
Just gently. Yeah. We have to go to the feet, and we have to do something very clever at the feet. We don't do that anymore. We just do this. We just got lazy. Now, what that is what we call a tapping. It's the same function as a save button or the same function in the computer program. It basically takes information from the display and loads it back onto the hard drive. See, what he's displaying in terms of bodily symptoms is what's on his hard drive and his content displayed through the body as this symptom, as this condition. What we're doing when we do this is we're doing the reverse. Okay? So we're going lights on. So we're instructing, you might say, the mainframe or the computer system to switch on the light. So I can't get into the details of all of this, but just take my word for it for now. So hold. Makes him strong again. So he says, yep, I'm ready and I'm raring to go. Hold. Hold. And he is going to cooperate with me because he has what we call an open keyboard here in his right hand. Now, using the computer analogy once again, effectively he has two keyboards. He has a left and a right hand. So we have to find out which one is switched on and which one is switched off, because it'd be very confusing if we try and use a computer system with two keyboards. So one hand is invariably off and the other one is invariably on. So he's saying, yes, I want to tell you about something through my right hand. We have to use his hand because we can't use English. Can you see? We're using Mudras. So he's saying, this hand is receptive basically for programming. Hold. Now I have absolutely no idea what he wants to say, and I don't even know what he wants to talk about. And I don't think you have much of a clue either, do you? No.
I often don't.
No. So this is a case very much of the blind leading the blind. And hopefully we're not going to end up in a ditch. As I say, this is not the way I would normally work. It would normally take me about 20 minutes to arrive just at this point. So I've missed out all the preliminary work here and we've just jumped in. And of course, I very rarely work with an audience looking on. So it's also a very contrived situation. So let's make a start. Let's see what he wants to say. I'm going to challenge a sequence of mudras in my hand on his belly. This is where he houses his feelings. This is this container here, the vegetative container, so it's receptive. And we'll see which one he responds to. He's strong. Hold, breathing. Okay, so I'm going to challenge a sequence of mudras, starting with this one. Hold. Oh dear, that's the first one in the sequence. Let's try the second to make sure he just didn't switch off the light. Hold. Okay, so he's not saying anything to this mudra. He says, no, I'm not interested in that. But, and I can't quite get it into this hand because I'm right-handed. I have to use his ribs. But he is saying, actually, something here. So he's strong, right? And I've only just put my fingers into a position like this, and I've gone, actually, let's test again, same strength, and he just goes weak. You're weak, yeah? Yeah. You can't help it. So he's saying, basically, this is relevant. This is the gateway from my outer symptom picture to my inner content. So I try it in his fingers. Resting your elbow on the couch. It's a tricky one. This, as you can see, I can only do it myself here. In one hand. Perfect. Hold. Makes him weak. So I'm going to say, look, okay, that's all very interesting, but are you absolutely sure? So I'm going to pop it in the other hand. And there's a reason for this. It's because almost all of us are bipolar. We have a masculine and a feminine aspect. We have a right and we have a left brain. So the right brain controls the left side of the body and vice versa. So we're challenging both the masculine and the feminine sides of him to see that both sides of his psyche can actually read this. And if he can, he'll come back into strength, which he has. So he already knows where he's going. The difficulty is with the therapist. The therapist is a bit dumb. The therapist is a bit slow. He's already got all of this information inside, and he's having to just leak it out one little piece at a time so that I can get it and feed it back to his conscious mind. So at this point, hold is saying I'm strong, I'm ready to go. So I'm going to do something here which I'm not going to explain because I haven't got time, but just bear with me. Hold. Didn't make any difference. So say I'm not interested in that. Hold. Says no, I don't want to go there either. Hold. But something here. Can you see? He went weak. So I say, okay, that's what you want to explore. Let's explore it. I have no idea what this is. So let's see what it is. Hold. You say, no, it's not that. Is it this? No, it's not that either. Okay. Hold.
Can we just switch in Mudras?
Yeah. You can do it like this. Hold. It's saying it's this. Hold. See, our fields are interconnected at this point. So I could just hold, and it makes him as weak as a baby. He cannot resist it, can you?
No.
There's no way. So keep that there. Put this here. So this is a language, and this is a little bit nicer, or a little bit better, or more sophisticated, you might say, than just testing bottles of things. Who was it that was telling me about bottles? Yes. Yes. We could do, see, bottles are the same. We could put a bottle on here, like an allergen, or a vitamin, or a nutrient, and we could do the same test. But we're doing the same thing, really, but with mudras. It gives us more precise information. Hold. So you're saying, yeah, I want to talk about this. So I'm saying, oh, come on, are you absolutely sure? So you're saying, well, let's see. Hold. And you said, yeah, I'm absolutely really clear about it. So that was interesting, yeah? And that's actually told us absolutely nothing. As it stands. So I have to interpret that for him. So the first mudra we used here was what is a mudra called restoring the presence, or restoring the potential. So he's saying, look, I want to go down into my basement, and I want to find something perhaps I've neglected. Perhaps something that's fallen into disrepair, or that was previously damaged when used. But I've just kind of tucked it away down there, hid it away. So I want to go down there, and I want to find this thing, and I want to bring it into full functionality. So this is about a part of his content that actually is not fully functional, that he wants to have fully functional now. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. So let's see what that is. So what I have here is a database that basically is a facsimile, you might say, of the library that he's accessing at the inner, so that I can look at it here and then translate it back into English. Because I've absolutely no idea what this is. I relax that hand, we're on this hand. So this is here, it's here, it's here, and that comes here. This is the mudra, which is called in step. So he's saying, actually, there's a part of me that's going out of step with my essence. Usually implies the animal force that has taken him lateral, taken him sideways, out of step. So in a way, it's as if, I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Gordon.
Gordon, yes, it's as if Gordon is wanting to move, to use an analogy, he's wanting to move forward inwardly on his journey, on his odyssey, on his chosen path through life. And yet somehow there's a problem with his gate mechanism. You know, the gate mechanism is the locomotive mechanism that allows us to go that way. So one leg is kind of going this way, the other leg is maybe going forward, but then this leg maybe goes out this way, and he's not coherently, with integrity, you might say, walking his path. So he's saying, actually, I need to get back on my path. So what is the force that's corrupted that? What is the force that seduced him, that pulled him, that's drawn him off the straight and narrow, so to speak? Okay, can you understand? Yeah. So my main thing here for him is the resource is, where is my mission? Where's my purpose? What is my direction? Where is north? Can you see? And how can I put one foot in front of the other in order that I can actually reach that objective? Okay. So we didn't test it, so let's test it. Breathing and hold. And that makes him as weak as a baby. So he's saying, yep, absolutely that. So that's on the side of the joint. That's on the bed of the nail. That's here. And that's here. Okay. And again, breathing and hold. And he's nice and strong. Superman again. So keeping the mudras in, I'm going to work around his belly. I won't explain this to you just yet because it's just too complicated for now. But just trust what I'm doing. Hold. Strong. So saying not interested. Hold. Strong. No. Hold. Something here. You can't. No. It is weird, isn't it? Yes. I remember when I first experienced it, I remember thinking, what? I've got no control over my own body. And then I'm only just moving my fingers, and it's just making him strong and weak and strong and weak. It's very powerful. The interesting thing about kinesiology is it's not just informing me. And this is the key to this. It's actually informing him, because he's getting his own feedback. He can feel it. Hold. Oh, I'll do it here. Hold. It's actually easier on him, actually. It reads better. Hold. And breathing and hold. See? I was busy talking, I was blabbering away, and I got a false test. Can you see? It was actually strong, but because I was talking and I was distracted, it was actually indicated weak. So that's my force actually dragging him, actually pulling him. So once I go quiet, and I'm here and I'm present, hold. Hold. No, it actually is weak, so I stand corrected. So 1, 2, 3. There we go. 1, 2, 3. So it's saying in step, sub mode 1, 2, 3. Hold. Yes. I've the foggiest idea what this is. See, this is a way by which the mind is completely undercut. We haven't got to hypnotize him or put him into any kind of trance or altered state or anything like that. In fact, he needs to be fully present and fully on board the whole time. As soon as he starts to drift off, the muscle test will go weak. It won't indicate there's coherency anymore in the system. And I have to remind him, hey, come on, wake up, be present, and then we can start to work again. But his conscious mind is not aware of what's actually going on at all. And yet his body, which is more akin or associated, you might say, the body and the subconscious, remember, are working together to give this muscle feedback. So I'm going to just tap that in. So just relax and we'll have a little look, see what this is to do with. Okay, this is to do with acceptable boundaries. Acceptable boundaries. So there will be some issue right now in his life where boundaries are obviously going to be an issue for him at this moment in time. Any ideas?
No.
No? Okay. 1, 2, 3. This is the force of the boundary, to be in step so that I can manifest a proper boundary. So he's saying, basically, I need to manifest a more integral, more coherent, more robust boundary. In other words, there's bits of me, in terms of my content, that are leaking to other people or to the environment, or the stuff coming in from the environment and other people that are coming into me inappropriately. Do you understand?
Yes.
So this would imply through behavior that one would then be swayed very easily off one's path, depending upon the nature of the forces that are actually penetrating or entering through the boundary. Can you see? Does that make more sense?
Sort of, yes.
Yeah, okay. So we have a thread, and we're starting here. This is like the first statement. So you say, I need to restore my boundary, as there's a tendency for me to leak, or there's a tendency for stuff to come in that's not appropriate. And therefore, the nature of that is that it's taken me off my path. To some degree. I'm not saying he's completely wayward or anything, but his gate mechanism is not coherent. In other words, he's not able at an inner level to put one foot in front of the other. This will affect him emotionally. You will feel this emotionally. Hold. He actually is weak. Okay, so that's an unexpected response. And I thought he was basically saying, actually, I've had enough. Hold. So the first thing I'd check is it that he's just switched off the light? Hold. And he says, yes, I jolly well have. So what's happened at this point is he's gone down into his basement, and he's gone, actually, I need to look at this, but it has such a huge charge, I don't want to. I'm going to switch off the light. The inner animal mechanism comes in and protects him because it's about boundary, it's about protection. Can you see? So he's saying, actually, this is the way I protect myself. I switch off my light. Can you see? Which is what he's just done. Okay.
And maybe it's too big a thing for this context.
It might be too big for this context, but yeah, it might be. But he's aware of that. He's fully aware of that. It may be that we just need to do a little bit of cleaning up here a little bit or something, just for the sake of this demonstration. Because normally we would talk for about an hour and a half. And we're only 20 minutes in here maybe? So we're just at the beginning of this dialogue. And this is why, and this is what rather we really mean by the work of inner dialogue. This is an inner dialogue as opposed to an outer, let me figure this out, let me be clever, let me try and understand what's going on for the chap. It's not like we switch our brains off, but our brain becomes receptive rather than active and dynamic in terms of you follow me, I know best. So I'm following him because he actually does know best. Yeah. Okay, and giving him a little break and having a little talk, he's actually come back into strength, which indicates more. Hold. Hold. Okay. But he is telling me I have to stop. The reason is that he swapped hands. When a client swaps hands, it means the practitioner is laying their stuff on them. Which means basically I'm too much in a teaching demonstration mode here to actually be truly receptive to what he's going to say. And I'm starting now to lead him. So he goes, actually there's more information, which is back off. Okay. So we will actually have to stop. Yeah. My teacher, when he first started with this work, this didn't exist. He is a member of what's called Subud. Who's heard of Subud here? Yeah. I'm also a member. You a member? No, I don't think so. No. You know people. Yeah. And his practice was really one of surrender, surrendering to get guidance. So whenever he would get stuck with a client, he would basically just sit back and he would just surrender to see what he received for that client. And that's how he would work. He was an osteopath. So you can imagine it was quite an unusual practice. He's osteopath, cranial osteopath, and acupuncturist. But he used to work with his clients in a state of grace and surrender. However, one time he noticed, when he was sitting there, that as he was opening and surrendering, his fingers went into a mudra. And he was working with an assistant who was also in Subud and who was also helping him with this client. And they looked at each other and they noticed that their fingers were actually in the same identical mudra. And he'd actually received at that point his first mudra. And that was the first thing that went into this work. So he wrote it down. This means this. And it was actually this mudra here. It's a mudra called entanglement. In other words, my consciousness or my feelings have become entangled with something else. And it was to do with the death of his teacher, a chap called Alan Beardall, who had just died, I think, a few weeks previous to that, but couldn't really move on, so to speak, in terms of his spirit, his soul. And he was entangled with something here on the earth. And he came to Solihin to actually unentangle him. So that was the very first mudra. And then from that, the mudras really started to flow. It was like the floodgates opened for Solihin. And he started to receive dozens of mudras almost daily. And each of them would go into the work. So he'd start to write them down. And eventually, over time, this structure built up. And he was just using it for his own use. And then he did a training going back about 25 or so years, of which I was one of those individuals I was pleased to go on, where he initially taught this work to a bunch of us. And I was quite a young guy then, but I was very happy to work with and study with Solihin at that time. What happened then was that we all go out and treat clients. And then when we hit a blank, or we hit an area of the work that actually hasn't been filled in yet, we receive it, or we use the tools within the context of this work to find out what that is, and then we enter it into the work. So the point is that this work is not a mental construct. This work is incredibly eclectic. It's growing up one entry at a time, being added from clients. So it's actually come out of clients. And it basically is now in a structure of a database that I can just click and I can just go with. It's much more easier. Back in the old days when I used to work at the Totnes Natural Health Centre, I had a suitcase full of manuals.
That's what I meant by the bottles. I knew you had this suitcase.
Yeah, this suitcase full of just reams and reams of paper, which basically were all the entries in this work. And now we've got it all on a database and it can easily go onto our laptops. It makes it much easier, basically. There's two processes here. The one process is the illuminating. So what we're doing through the use of the mudras and through the feedback is we're illuminating what's in the shadow, what's in the basement. In a sense, that's almost half the job done. When we illuminate something, we take the charge out of it. The second half of the work, though, which can happen at any time, but usually happens at the end, but quite often it can happen 2 or 3 times during the course of a session, is what we call a facilitation. A facilitation really is, it's this mudra here. It's quite simple. We load it into the client's hands. If they respond to that, they're basically saying, yes, I need to change my energy state. I need for a permanent shift to be made around this. What tools, what tricks, what remedies, what acupuncture, who do I go and see, what practice do I need to do? And this can be multitude and varied from, say, something as simple as a bark flower remedy or holding acupuncture points to, I had a lady actually, last year when I was in Bergen, she had to go and bury her dog. Yeah, I was like, I mean, it's not something you'd expect to hear, but it just said that actually she had to go and visit a crematorium and place the ashes in the ground. I didn't even know that was in the work, but it was in there. And I said to her, actually, this is a very strange thing, but you need to go and visit a crematorium and you need to put some ashes in the ground. What could that be? She says, oh my God, that's my dog's ashes. They've been sitting on the mantelpiece for the last 5 years. And I've been meaning to do it, but I just can't. I says, you now need to do it. That's what we call a facilitation. Another time it was, someone I remember needed to go and they needed to acknowledge the ancestral resources. So they needed to stand, they needed to face it right, they needed to surrender and just feel into the work that we did and acknowledge the ancestors and thank them. Other times it can be a matter of forgiveness, that the person needs to go away and they need to genuinely forgive something for some violation of some infringement. They need to just do that, either with me or on their own. Other times they have to stop using a mantra, or they have to change their meditation, or they have to go and get some acupuncture from Steve, or I send them off to an osteopath because I don't do osteopathy. So if osteopathy comes up, I go, actually, this is the prescription. I'll give you this. I'll write it out for you, but you need to take this to an osteopath. So then I refer them on to go and get some remedial work done. Because I can't do everything. And my job, mostly, I feel, is a communicator and an interpreter. And then we can facilitate. We have a lot of modalities within this work. We have 31 times 32 facilitation modalities, different therapies and energy processes that we can apply. I think that's about 900 odd, isn't it? Yeah. So they know what to do. Again, it's through the mudras and through the process of them telling me what it is that they need to do in order that they can shift state. and then we do it. Kinesiology, and this is something I don't often make public. Kinesiology is inherently inaccurate. Okay, except if you know why. See, it's the animal force that corrupts. It's the animal force that corrupts all of us. And it's the animal operating through the instinctual mind that can actually take the client away from their truth and away from their knowing and away from integrity and clarity of response. And they lean in and they bend into the practitioner's map, basically. Their model of reality then gets superimposed onto the client. And we do it quite innately, because after all, a client is there wanting for the practitioner to do that. You know, they're saying, you know better than me, you tell me. So that's the way it normally works in that scenario, and that's fine, and that's good. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But in kinesiology, that would work against you. And that's where you would get those erroneous tests, which would indicate, just like now, I said to Gordon, actually you've swapped hands, which indicates that I am now starting to lead you. Because I'm in a teaching role here, I'm not in an open space. So I have to stop. So it's knowing that, and when it comes up, acknowledging it, and then you're okay. And then kinesiology, they can resume, you know, at an incredible accuracy. But there is the animal force in all of us that corrupts, and it usually operates through the mind. And unfortunately, that does happen. But the work itself actually will go, practitioner, you've just gone off. I had a client the other day that corrected me twice. I had to apologize. I said, I don't know what's wrong with me today. Normally, I don't have to be corrected at all, and I can work coherently. But twice in one session, it was just too much. And the reason why that happened was at the beginning of the session, the client indicated to me there was a reciprocal dynamic. We always check for reciprocal dynamic at the beginning. It's a piece I missed out here today. In other words, do I have similar stuff going on in me right now as the client is going to be presenting in this session? Because if that is the case, when that comes up for him, it's going to trigger that in me, and I'm going to be looking at his stuff through my filters. And I'm no longer in a clean and clear space. So that happens. Yeah.
Humble enough to acknowledge that, then it's good to go.
Yeah, but the work will show you that as well, Steve. It will actually say, actually, there's a reciprocal dynamic, and you've just fallen down, and you better stand up again in order that you can help this person. So I have to go, okay, brush myself off, stand up, I'm back. Usually involves me stepping aside and having a little quiet just for a minute or two, just getting my center, coming back. But there is a system of checks and balances within this work that tell us when we're off track. Like just now with Gordon, for example. So as long as I'm awake to that and I'm humble enough and I can say, actually, I'm sorry, I've made a mistake, which I sometimes do. I've just been corrected, I need to go back and correct that mistake. I think that's much better than just going, actually, I'm just going to carry on. You know.